A new report claims that banks have closed 1 million accounts in the last 4 years. Yes, you heard that right. This worrying number comes amid the fallout of Nigel Farage's bank account being closed due to his political views, which resulted in the resignation of the NatWest CEO, Dame Alison Rose. The government is planning to introduce a rule that gives customers 90 days to challenge their accounts being terminated. But with these shocking new figures and senior MPs such as Chancellor Jeremy Hunt apparently being refused a bank account, will this be enough to get us out of this dystopian madness? I'm joined now by the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union and debanking victim, Toby Young. Toby, how are you?
I'm good, thanks
for joining us in the studio tonight. And so you've been a victim of debanking yourself.
Yes, so in September of last year, I was notified by PayPal that they were closing my personal PayPal account. Now, I didn't get 90 days notice. I didn't get 60 days notice, which they're supposed to give you under the current regulations. It was just a notification that my account had been closed, effective immediately.
Right.
And in addition, like a few minutes later, I got a notification saying they closed the account of the Free Speech Union and the account of the Daily Sceptic, my news publishing site. So overnight, with no notification, no right of appeal, and no real explanation, all three accounts were closed. And I tried writing to, like Nigel Farage, I tried writing to the CEO of PayPal. I wrote to the head of PayPal Europe. I tried every which way to try and appeal the decision, to try and find out why they'd closed my accounts, to try and get some kind of explanation.
And did they tell you anything?
The only thing they would tell me is that one of the accounts, they wouldn't say which one, had breached the acceptable use policy. And that's the size of War and Peace. That was really unhelpful.
Nobody reads the terms and conditions.
It was like, it was like, which bit of the policy, which chapter at least? It's the 100 chapters. And when I discovered that there was no real right of appeal through internal processes, I decided to appeal by taking it to the court of public opinion. I went public with it. I broke the story on Mark Dolan's show, actually, on GB News. And some MPs got involved. Jacob Rees-Mogg started asking questions, and after a couple of weeks of this public pressure, PayPal then caved and restored all three accounts. But I was lucky, I had the megaphone to make a really big fuss in the public square about it. I was able to appeal it publicly in the media, and so in the end they did a reverse ferret. Most people to whom this happens don't have that opportunity, and they just have to lump it.
And have you stayed with PayPal, or have you moved on to another?
No, I haven't used PayPal since. But one of the things the Free Speech Union did when our accounts were restored, we didn't think, OK, that's fine, we'll move on. We started talking to government ministers, talking to the Treasury about what they could do to make it more difficult to protect people from the same thing happening to them. And it was partly as a result of our lobbying the Treasury, that they've introduced these new rules whereby they have to give you 90 days notice now before they close your account, and they have to give you a better explanation than you've breached our acceptable use policy. So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and why do you think banks are doing this? Because I know when PayPal cancelled your account and there was the furore, a lot of people decided to close their PayPal accounts. I didn't close mine, but I cleared out the funds in it so they wouldn't have those to invest. So it's clearly commercially damaging when they attack somebody like yourself. Why do you think they're doing it?
Well, the irony of this, Leo, is that they often say the reason they're closing accounts, this was the explanation in Nigel Farage's case, they closed Nigel Farage's account because they were worried about the bank's reputation. They thought that banking Nigel posed a risk to Coutts's reputation.
But nobody knew that Nigel banked with Coutts.
Of course not. He hadn't told anyone about it, and he'd been banking with them for 40 years. And actually, the damage done to Coutts's reputation was closing his account because they wanted to protect their reputation. I mean, can't imagine a more colossal harm being done to Coutts's reputation than how they behaved in that particular situation. The CEO of Coutts had to resign, as did the CEO of NatWest, the parent company. So the idea that you're protecting the reputation of the bank by kicking out these awkward customers is for the birds.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And we're seeing people talking about ESG, which are the sort of environmental, social and governance guidelines that a lot of large investment companies use to direct their resources. And you can only draw down credit from these companies if you can show that you're doing something good. And showing that you're doing something good, as we've seen, in any attempt to achieve utopia, usually involves doing terrible things. By cancelling Farage or by cancelling the Free Speech Union, they can say, look, we're doing something good. We're cancelling these divisive organisations or people or whatever. But in fact, they're doing something bad.
Well, yeah, and actually there was a direct link between ESG and the closure of Nigel Farage's account. Coutts had signed up to this new movement called B Corp, whereby they became a benefit corporation. It's a kind of company now. You can get this certification, a bit like becoming a Stonewall diversity champion. You get the certificate to put in a frame and put on the CEO's wall saying you're a benefits company. And that means essentially enforcing compliance with ESG policies.
Right.
And it's an American activist organisation that now has, it's set up effectively in the UK. And more UK companies have got this certificate now than any companies anywhere else in the world. It's like more popular now. It's growing faster in the UK than anywhere else. And Coutts had signed up. They'd become a B Corp certified company. And they were saying, when in their internal notes, we're cancelling Nigel because he no longer complies with this new forward-looking, inclusive sense of purpose we have. All of that is language that comes from this American-based activist organisation, which is spreading its tentacles overseas.
It's like a voluntary version of the Chinese social credit system. I mean, that's insane. And do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for this? Because we've seen ESG do incredible damage. The woke rules they follow, like Bud Light, for example, it's lost huge market share. So it's doing commercial damage. Do you think that's going to force a change in the market and a shift away from ESG rules? Well,
I think the fact that attempts to close the accounts of some high-profile people, including Nigel Farage, have backfired so spectacularly, and heads have rolled at a very senior level. I think that helps. I think the boycott of Bud Light. We saw, I think, earlier last week that the mothership, Anheuser-Busch, has lost something like 10% of its net wealth as a result of the boycott of Bud Light by partnering with Dylan Mulvaney, this trans influencer. There's a pushback against ESG. There's a pushback against ULEZ expansion, the fact that the Conservatives held on in Uxbridge and Ruislip. Rishi Sunak has just approved all these drilling and exploration licences in the North Sea. It's beginning to feel as if there's a bit of a pushback against this kind of woke authoritarianism, whether in the financial sector, in the energy sector, in the drink sector. So I think there is reason for some hope.
Brilliant. Well, that's a slightly cheerier note to end on. Toby, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck with everything that the Free Speech Union does.